The Walking Dead is a 2010 TV show that talks about what happens to humanity after a virus has destroyed the society. The story follows a group of survivors with their leader Rick Grimes, an ex-police officer, trying to struggle to find food and shelter all across America. In the aftermath, there is nothing left. All the towns and cities have collapsed. There's no institution that might help anyone else. So the people have to fend for themselves. The method that they have to use is mostly scavenging. Just try to survive on it as long as they can. The exciting part happens in the story when the zombies just come in like a plot change and destroy whatever the humans have built. You can almost see the zombies as like forces of nature, where like a natural disaster, they just keep coming back again and again and impact every choices that humans have made so far. But one of the biggest features of the show is how it covers humans and their interactions with each other. Because you just not have one surviving group, but many others who are also trying to fight for the same resources. But after the collapse of society, there's no authority, there's no institution that might help you work together or organize. So people end up fighting with each other. Humans in the TV show are not always reliable. In fact, they're often the cause of most gruesome and violent moments. In the world of Walking Dead, it's every person for themselves. Rick Grimes, leading the group, is also trying to just manage and fight and kill everything and every person who comes in their way. You can almost feel the tension in the group when they are confronted with an outsider. It always comes down to a choice of kill or be killed. In the constant struggle of survival, it's not humans against forces of nature, which you can consider to be the zombies, but it's a fight of people against people when there's no civilization, no society, and only the forces of nature are ruling everywhere. Part 1. The social contract hypothesis. The setting of The Walking Dead, the struggle for survival, life in wilderness, trying to fight other people, it's very close to what philosopher Thomas Hobbes calls the state of nature. According to Hobbes, primitive humans lived in small herds where there was no system of governance as per our modern standards. Their life was really difficult and there was no system in place to protect them from causing harm to each other. People had unlimited freedom and the right to almost everything, with the liberty to pillage, murder, and rape anyone they want to. Consider this example. If you have an orchard of apples and your neighbor has a field of tomatoes and you want some tomatoes, there's no method of getting the tomatoes other than using violence. You can steal the tomato or kill your neighbor and get whatever you can from him. The other option, which might have immediately come to your mind, is to exchange maybe some apples for the tomatoes. This is where you come into agreement with your neighbor, and this is the entire point of creating a society. So this is what Hobbes says happened in the primitive time, that people needed to come together, so they started forming agreements which turned into contract. It's called a social contract, which is basically an agreement of how we are going to live in a society, the certain rules and conditions that everyone has to follow so everyone can have a better life. Human beings are considered entirely selfish but rational. We are going to try to find the best ways to maximize our fulfillment and personal satisfaction, but we are also rational enough to understand that if everyone goes around doing that, there might not be enough for all of us. So we have to come up with a way where everyone can come together and find some success in their collective behavior. To enter into a contract, you might have to give up certain freedoms, certain things that you want to do. For example, you can't go out on the road naked dancing to your favorite song. I don't know if people want to do that. But in return, you might also have all the benefits that a person can get from the society, including the infrastructure, public institutions, social relationships, and so on. You also have to understand that the contract is not always explicit. So for example, if you are a natural born citizen of India, you did not sign a contract for living in the society, but now you have to. Again, you get all the benefits, but if you break any rules, you will also get punished. In the same way, an immigrant who is moving to India and trying to become a citizen, they will literally have to sign a contract to become part of this society. So it works in both ways. There's an explicit contract as well as an implicit contract. The social contract hypothesis leads with this assumption only that people are selfish and they want to work for themselves. But If everyone is doing that in the society, then the society as a whole will grow further.
Greed is good.
Yet, despite being rational and entering into a contract, we might still be greedy enough to turn on each other the first chance we get. We might not hold up our end of the contract. So Hobbes says that you need a strong authority to keep things in order to ensure that the contract is followed. He calls it Leviathan, but you can consider it as a dictator. But that dictator has to be chosen by the people. It has to be an explicit consent of the people that this person, this authority can and will ensure the safety of the people and ensure that the contract is followed by everyone. There are other philosophers who disagree with this a bit, saying that you do not need a complete authority to ensure that everyone follows the contract, but you only need to ensure that people do not cause harm to each other. So you need minimum authority that ensures your safety. So you have to not give up all of your freedoms, but some of it, so that other person can also do the same things they want to, and there's no controlling authority over anyone else. Once again, the fundamental part of this understanding is coming from the same point that humans are selfish. We are going to do what is best for us, not for the community or not for the society. It just so happens that if everyone is doing that, it works for everyone else. And just like Walking Dead, when push comes to shove, we will turn on each other. Raise your hands if you have ever been told that society is a dangerous place. It's every person for themselves. People are ready to con you, to get you, and you have to be smart enough to get back at them first before they can fraud you or before they can hurt you. This is literally how we just tend to perceive the world, that it's just full of bad apples, and if we are the good ones, we have to do our best to survive in this world. Despite the contract, despite the authority, despite the social structure, we all know deep down inside that the world is not as safe or as secure as it should be, and people are not actually very reliable enough. And it sounds kind of true, doesn't it? If you look at the world, there's poverty, hunger, famine, destruction, and how can we not agree that the world is a bad place? If you're anything like me and do not want divine interpretations of how the society functions, you might agree that all of this is caused by people. People who are mean and selfish. They are causing harm to other people who might not be as equipped to deal with the problems that are created in the society. In short, humans are just pretty bad at treating other humans. Is the fall of society really that inevitable as Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, or Rousseau had posited, that we are going to be just cruel and brutish towards each other? Are we really sure that it is going to happen? Part 2. Mean World Syndrome. Our media and social narratives also keep telling us how bad the world is, and we also keep engaging with it. In the worst year of the century, 2020, so far, the people found themselves endlessly scrolling the bad and the worst news that was coming their way. The media even had a word for it. It was called doom scrolling. We are surrounded by a mountain of information that keep telling us how bad the world is, and we keep engaging with it. And there's no way that it's not going to impact our behaviors and attitudes. In the 1960s, American professor of communication George Gerbner proposed the idea that the constant impact of media on our mind literally changed how we perceive reality. Constant bombardment of information through the media shapes our perspective about the world and reality, and also determines our attitude and reaction to it. Our minds are literally shaped by the nature of the content we consume. This is called the cultivation theory. Before Gerbner, there was a debate whether violent content for children was actually making them violent. But Gerbner suggested otherwise. He said that violent content does not make you violent, but it makes you think that this is how the world is. He says that we end up normalizing the violence and start considering it to be a common occurrence in the world, including all the crimes and the bad things that happen to people. He also termed it the mean world syndrome. If you're growing up in a home where there is more than, say, 3 hours of television per day, for all practical purposes, you live in a meaner world and act accordingly. Then your next door neighbor who lives in the same world but watches less television. The programming reinforces the worst fears and apprehensions and paranoia of people. Gerbner's research proved that by shaping human perception, you can also shape people's behavior. This is basically what corporate media is all about. Every day we are bombarded with advertisement that pretends to sell us our hidden desires, but they are basically shaping the narrative of society and making us react and act upon the things that they want us to buy. And not just advertisements, it is also true for our folk stories, mythologies, books, and so on. Gerbner understood the major problems it might have for people at large in our modern societies. He says, whoever tells the story of a culture really governs human behavior. It used to be the parent, the school, the church, the community. Now it's a handful of global conglomerates that have nothing to tell, but a great deal to sell. We might not become prone to causing violence, but more afraid to an imminent danger that is not even there. So who is it that gets to control our social narratives and define these stories to be a reality when they are not? Let's try to find out. Italian philosopher Antonio Gramsci in his prison notebooks talks about the use of cultural hegemony as a method of controlling and shaping the culture of the masses. The ruling class has so much influence over the culture that it can literally shape what kind of narratives are told within the society. They control the media, they control cultural influences, and what they believe about society and how society should be becomes part of our reality at the mass. The term hegemony refers to one group having the power to make decisions for another group. Take, for example, casteism. The entire structure of caste is a tool that is used by Brahmins to maintain their supremacy amongst other classes in the society. They use the tools of religion and mythology to propagate a narrative in the society that they are supreme and other castes also fall into a separate kind of hierarchies. These hierarchies tend to become a part of the reality of those who are also being exploited under the same condition. Think about it. It's the best way to ensure power and control for your small group than always resorting to violence, which might also not turn out in your favor, because if you're going to use violence to control society, the people you're going to use are the ones you're using violence against. So using culture as a means of controlling the masses is one of the most simple and direct and most useful method where the ruling classes ensure that they remain in power. And even today, the media uses the same formula. Take, for example, American crime TV shows. Valencia Gardner proposed a study where she talks about how these shows shape the tolerance towards police brutality and the violence against people of color in the United States. These shows often project a glorification of police and their actions by showing how horrible and gruesome every kind of crime is, when in reality, murders and other kind of violent crimes are not that common in society. People started supporting police and police brutality in the name of suppressing violent crimes. And we can see how that turned out. And now you might be thinking, hold on, it sounds like a conspiracy theory. And yeah, it does sound like a conspiracy theory, but it's not, because the facts are very simple. The rich have the means to control the media and change the narratives of our society. It's not just about the money also. Studies after studies have shown that there's a strong lack of diversity in our media. People from different backgrounds are not able to get to those positions of power. And people who are pretty much like me, cis-het Brahmin men, are sitting in the position of power and making all the decisions. And when you believe and benefit in the existing system, you're just going to repeat the current narratives without even questioning them. And it might even sound like a common harmless practice to you. But it does cause a certain kind of harm, and it does end up promoting your worldview to the rest of the mass. So we can see how people in control can make all the decisions and shape our reality. And make no mistake, I'm not saying that those things do not happen. Violent crimes do happen. People are cruel and mean to each other. But it's not as common as it is shown to be, and it should definitely not help us make the decision that this is the kind of society we live in. People are not exactly as we see in our medias and films. Big news. The repetition and bombardment of these information demands you to be compliant and makes you feel like an outsider if you question them, that you are too idealist for saying that humans can be good.
Part 3. The social stress.
In the year 2018, a massive flood hit the state of Kerala, destroying lives and properties and just shaking up the entire system. Hundreds of lives were lost and thousands were affected in terms of food and shelter. It was a calamity, but it was a calamity well managed. Thousands of volunteers from across the country and even outside India came together, collecting resources and distributing it to people. It was estimated that around 300 crores were just collected through crowdfunding, which went to the relief of the people who were affected by the floods. But nowhere the society collapsed. There was no chaos or disorder, no looting or violence from the people who were affected or who had the opportunity. Any and every calamity that has pushed us as a species to pain and destruction has been dealt with solidarity and support from all facets of people. We do not, historically speaking, tend to divide ourselves in small groups and end up fighting petty wars. Research says that when we are most vulnerable as a species, we tend to show our best behavior. In times of high stress, we realize the worth of human effort and come together to collectively help and heal each other. Take the current example, COVID-19. India has more than 17 million cases and we just recorded a high number of 3 lakh cases in a single day. We are living in times of high stress. You don't need me to tell you that. The second wave has hit us hard and it might take us a long time to recover from it. The systems that were put in place are not working. There was a need for more lockdowns, isolation, healthcare services, and so on. But when the system seems to be falling, it's the people who are coming together to help each other out, pooling resources together, amplifying voices, using their contacts to save lives, doing the best they can. Everybody is going out of their way to offer support to those who need it. And it's not just people with privilege and security who are going forward. Do you remember the Shramik train fiasco? You might have seen that video on social media where a Shramik train was passing through the flood-affected areas of Assam and people just started throwing out their foods and supplies to the people who were affected by the flood. These people in the trains had limited items for themselves, but they went out of their way to offer support to those who were actually in need of it at the moment. A few days after that, another train that was stranded in Begusarai in Bihar was offered support by the people from the village who came together with foods and supplies to help those people. I'm not saying all of this to make you feel good. It's not a now this video. This is Bewaja. Our purpose is to look at what the society considers to be unimportant. And from the looks of it, compassion and love are pretty much told as unimportant or useless from our social narratives. And you might be thinking that this is just another video that is telling you to be compassionate towards other people. And yeah, it is. But the fact is also that we are truly compassionate creatures. It is in our nature to want to help other people. Your apathy towards these concepts might also be coming from a place of helplessness. And if that is your stance, I do empathize with you. Okay, so in the weeks that followed in the making of this video, I was also overwhelmed with the kind of news that was going around. In the last few months of 2020, I could see where the situation was heading. We did not have enough measures to take control of the situation, and we knew that this was coming. It was inevitable, and it was exhausting. The helplessness had just made me numb. I could not do anything about it. I could not reach out to people and help them or help myself. I'm lucky that no one around me succumbed to the disease. But yes, people did get infected and they did get sick, and it was pretty scary. So I understand if you're feeling helpless right now. I am also feeling the same, but it is the stress of helplessness that brings us together, that makes us want to help each other. We stand up for our fellow humans in adverse conditions because that's who we are. It is not the feeling of determination and control that pushes us forward to help other people. In fact, that's the other way around. If you feel in control, you do not want to help people because that idea is replaced by the thought that everyone is taking care of themselves. You might end up justifying it like, I did it, I didn't need any help. Why should other people ask for help? Because that is why we have built society. We live in an unequal society. We all know that. Our social narrative tells us that society is a ladder. You need to make effort to climb up, and if you cannot, you will remain at the bottom. But it neglects a basic reality of our society, that this is not a natural order. We have created it. The social contract hypothesis came around 17th century in Europe, at the time when a lot of people were questioning the monarchy's power. A king or a queen was usually ordained by the religious authority of that country because it was believed that they hold most of the power and their right to rule was given by the god. That idea was challenged to the power of people, that people should be able to decide who governs them. That was a very noble concept, but where did it lead Europe? The exploitation under the kings and the land-owning lords was replaced by the exploitation under factories and colonialization. Entire countries governed by the free will of their people were going out and exploiting other countries. So the state did not come into existence to protect people from harming each other, so much so as it tried to protect the interests of the privileged group in the society. If everyone starts thinking of society as a ladder, you have a divided society. If everyone thinks that they must procure resources for themselves first because other people will also do the same, you end up having groups of people who are just fighting against each other because they don't trust the other person. Inequality is not natural in our society. It's a man-made concept, not a sexist language. It's a fact. We think that the best in the society will lead us forward. The strongest will take care of the people. But we are not really a very strong species. We are soft. We are weak. We can't do everything on our own. We need help from other people. And in order to do that, we have constructed the concept of society. And society is not natural to humans. Every species does that. Every species needs help from its fellow members. So does humans. But very often, we are pitted against those fellow people in the same society. From an early age, we are trained to crush past them and win this race of life. But the fact is, we are not like that. And we can fight this mean world syndrome. We can fight this call to being selfish. We can again become hopeful by believing in our fellow humans. And I do not mean hope as a useless thing. Hope is not optimism when you sit at home and watch Netflix, avoiding all the negative news in the world. Hope is a revolutionary thing. Hope moves you forward. If you believe in a better world, if you want to struggle for a society that helps its fellow humans, then you are hopeful. And that is what makes you human. Thanks for watching.